Welcome to LEAPcast. I'm your host, Dr. George James. LEAP stands for Leaders, Entertainers, Athletes, and Performers. And I'm on a journey to connect with high achievers and highlight their unexamined human moments. Tune in to learn how these high-achieving LEAP individuals were able to reach their greatest potential, face their most difficult challenges, and embrace the human moments that helped them along the way. If you want to get the episode highlights directly in your email, then head to theleapcast.com right now to subscribe. Welcome everybody back to LEAPcast. I'm your host, Dr. George James, and we talk to amazing leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers. And today I get to talk to another good friend, Yanely Espinal, who I've got a chance to meet through our work with CNBC and their financial literacy. And she's just amazing. And so let me just bring her in right now. Welcome, Yanely. How are you?
Thank you so much. I want to say George, but I feel like I got to say Dr. James just to put some respect on your name. But I'm so happy to be here. I feel like talking about the work that's going on in financial education right now is so important more than ever. So I am here to drop the gems. I can't wait to jump in.
I want all the gems, and I'm so excited for our time to talk. What we like to start off with is what I call the LEAP story. So
Cool.
we want to just hear. I want to hear a little bit about your journey, and then we'll get into like all the stuff that you do. So we want to hear about like what were some of the building blocks, learning experiences, for you in your life early on. So if you don't mind, let's start there.
Yeah, okay. So let's take it back. I just made it to be an 80s baby. I was born in 89.
Nice.
And so I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. And that was a time where, there was no social media. We were probably, millennials were like probably the last generation that grew up at a time where we remember dial-up. Like we remember the do, and then,
Yes.
AOL, all that. So I think like I grew up in this era of like understanding that there was this revolution, like the technology was really changing and there was something major was happening with the internet, but we didn't really know it was going to be what it is today. And so I was kind of not really plugged into any of that. I wasn't really using the computer very often. We had one computer in my house. But I do remember that whole thing being a craze at my school. I remember when the first computer lab opened, we had like 3 computers for the whole school building. And, just like the internet being such a big thing. And today I feel like you're born with it in your hands. Like you're just born on the iPad, playing games and the phone and watching videos. And so, for me, that was I think something that very hugely shaped my experience of learning because I wasn't inclined to go to the internet to learn. My instinct was to get a book, because the internet wasn't really a thing yet. So when I actually got to high school, I was one of those nerdy kids that, always was trying to do really well in school because my parents are immigrants from Dominican Republic and they moved to New York City right the year before I was born. We're really lucky to be able to settle in Brooklyn and find a community of other immigrants that helped them out. And that was a beautiful thing for them. But the entire immigrant community in Brooklyn and then larger New York City too, and other areas, I'm sure, didn't really have a lot of financial education or resources about how to navigate your finances. So my parents kind of just, they did the government assistance route. We were on food stamps. They didn't necessarily think bigger than that. Coming from Dominican Republic, it was like, this is a huge step up for us to be here in America, for us to be in New York City. So I grew up, just kind of not sure if I was going to be able to go to college and pay for it. I knew like academically I would be able to get in, but the finances was this whole other thing because we never talked about money at home. So
Wow.
I was lucky, I
Even
got.
before you go further into that, like first of all, shout out to all the immigrants who come from another
Yes.
country, coming trying to do something because I can relate. My family is from Jamaica, very similar. Came to the U.S., worked hard, didn't have a lot of money. I knew I could
Oh,
get into college, but I didn't know how I was going
right.
to pay for it. So, shout out to your family and your parents who, did what they could. And like you said, this probably was a big thing for them. I guess when
Yeah.
did you recognize or learn that your family didn't have money or didn't talk about money?
That is such a good question. I think I didn't realize we weren't talking about it, but I think when I had to apply for college, I had to fill out the FAFSA, which, in order to get financial aid, you need that form to be filled out. And I remember logging in and it was like, you needed your parents' income tax papers. And that was something I never saw my parents' income tax papers. And so I had to go ask my dad, like, Papi, I'm gonna need you to give me your, your papers, your income tax statements. And he was like, ¿Para qué? For what? Like, what you want? He was not happy. Like, he's like, why are you looking at my papers for? And I was like,
Right.
I'm trying to get these, aids, grants and scholarships and financial aid. So I need that paper. And so he did provide it and we filled it out together. And I think that was the first time that I saw that my parents were making under $25,000
Wow.
with 9 children in New York City.
Wow.
2 parents, one working in the household, the other one was obviously a caretaker, because with 9 children, I mean, trying to get a babysitter, trying to get daycare for all, like, well, and half of us were a little older, the second half were the younger ones, but still daycare for a lot of kids is expensive. So my mom was kind of just taking care of picking up, drop off at school, and my dad was the one primarily working. And so that was when it hit me, like, oh, I don't know about money that much, but I'm pretty sure this is a very little bit amount of money to split
Yeah.
between all these mouths to feed.
Yeah, wow. I mean, so many families are having to do that, right? Like we don't really hear numbers like that. We
That's
don't
right.
really, and we don't believe those things are real, but they are.
Right.
They happen so often
That's
where
right.
like there might be really one person maybe making money or earning an income, and it's not really that much. Like I
Right.
remember like our family being, I think it was right above that line, right?
Mhm.
Right. So in school, that meant that uh, I couldn't really get assistance like
Right.
that, but at the same time we still needed some help and support, and we had to figure that out.
Right.
I'm so grateful for how hard my parents worked, and we, what I needed I had, right?
Yeah.
But like how so many people are under the line, the
Yes.
poverty line, so many people are at it, some people are just above it.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, like as you had to learn that, did that shape you in any way, or how did just growing up shape how you thought about money in the future?
Yeah. So actually, before I answer that, it's important for me to give context. I was going to say a little earlier that I got lucky, right? And the reason I say that I got lucky, well, it's a combination of luck and hard work too.
Yeah,
But I do
yeah,
have to recognize that a lot
100%.
of people work hard and don't get as lucky as me.
Yes.
So I worked really hard in school and was able to get a full scholarship to Brown University. That was honestly for me the number one most life-changing event that could have
Yes.
ever happened, because it was when I got plucked out of Brooklyn and
Yes.
placed onto this gorgeous campus in Providence, Rhode Island, a place I had never been to or heard of. And, went off to an Ivy League school. Like for me, that was huge.
Yeah.
And so to your question, I think like a lot of the money mindset and the shifts and the thinking around money that happened started my 18th year, like my 18th birthday on Brown's campus, because I realized that I was very, very different from all the kids around me. Like they just had so much money. I mean, they could go to Chipotle, they could go out to parties, they could buy new sneakers, new clothes, new shoes. I mean, it was like, where are they just getting all this money from? Like I didn't understand it. And so I thought like I had to compensate to try to fit in and try to look the part. Like I already kind of talked different and acted a little different, my vocabulary wasn't there yet, so I already felt like I stood out too much. And so to try to fit in a bit, I went ahead and started using credit cards
Yeah.
to buy all of the things that I thought I needed, like the UGG boots and the Jordans and the laptop and all the things. And that for me was like my entry point into thinking about money in a way that was separate, totally separate from my parents, like me independently making money decisions, was swiping my credit cards left and right. And some of the things I was buying was actually stuff I needed. Like I needed textbooks, you know what I mean? I needed art supplies for my art classes, but I didn't need to be buying new dresses and new shoes every weekend for a part. I'm not Jennifer Lopez. Like I didn't need to be doing all that. I'm not J-Lo, but at that time, I felt that pressure being 18, 19 to look that way and dress that way and buy those things. And that was my entry point into money, understanding like what it takes to make money, how much money things cost, like all those things that I just wasn't worried about when I was in high school.
Yeah, and what you're saying, once again I can relate to, right? I feel uh hard work, luck, and just God's love. I
Yes.
was able to get a scholarship, right, and a full academic ride to Villanova University, and that took me out of North
Yes.
Jersey into like PA and so forth. And so I totally get that, and also this pressure, right? Like
Yeah.
not only as a young adult, but just throughout life, right? This pressure
Mm-hmm.
where we feel like we have to like be like other people, or if we're not wearing the latest trends or doing something or going someplace, that somehow that means we are off. And I remember those credit cards and
Hmm.
using it in a way. And it was funny is that funny and not so funny. Like I remember my parents, my mom in particular, telling me, you know, you don't want to use credit cards because they got into a lot of credit card debt. Not having, a lot of money, got into a lot of credit card debt, and would share how they don't want me to, but they didn't necessarily tell me how not to.
Or why? They didn't really tell you why either. It was just like, nope, stay away, stay
Right,
away.
right. So I guess I was wondering for you, like, did you eventually, or during any of this time, as you're having this kind of awareness or in this mode, you're buying things, were you talking to your parents or anybody about money during those early years?
I really wasn't. And that's something I regret greatly because I feel like if I had had conversations with friends or with family, like I would have realized that what I was doing wasn't really smart, financially. But I think maybe a little tiny part of me in my gut knew that what I was doing wasn't right because like somehow I'm gonna have to pay this back at some point eventually.
Yeah.
And so I kind of kept it on the hush. And I remember actually that my parents were really struggling because right before I went off to college, my dad had a really bad car accident. He was a taxi driver in New York City,
Okay.
and there was a terrible intersection accident, and ended up in the hospital with I think he had like 40 stitches on one of his legs and like many stitches on his head. It was really scary, and because of that, the one sole breadwinner of our household was no longer able to work. And it was really stressful. Like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so I remember my freshman and sophomore year, I wasn't really talking to them about money, but I knew that they were struggling. So I would send them money. And where was I getting that money from? Like
Yes.
I needed my parents to give me money. They didn't have it and I knew they needed. So I would go and work like I had one or two jobs my freshman year. By my sophomore and junior year, I had five different jobs on campus. I was a little hustler because I
It's
knew
called the
that,
hustle right there.
how am I going to pay? Like, how am I going to pay? So I had multiple jobs and I would still use the credit cards
Yeah.
because I felt like my cash was so precious because I knew I needed to give it to my parents and I knew I needed to use it for cash only purchases. And so I used the credit cards for anything that I didn't necessarily need to use cash for. So a lot of times I was actually sending my parents money back and we weren't talking about it. And so they were like, oh, Yanely's doing great. She's on a scholarship, so she doesn't need money and she's working, so she's able to help us by sending us money. They had no idea that I had multiple credit cards and several of them were maxed out. Like they didn't even know that. And I didn't want anybody to know because I knew that there was a little bit of shame and embarrassment in the fact that I was doing that without really understanding the implications. But it was just how I thought I could best make it through at that time when I didn't really see any other pathways for somebody with no money.
Wow. I mean, everything that you're saying is so powerful, and I can relate in so many ways. And what I'm hearing and what I'm reflecting on even in my own self is this thought
Yeah.
that one, being on scholarship doesn't mean you don't need money, right? And
Say it
and
again.
and when you come from a family where you don't or can't really ask them for money, right? You have college paid for,
Yes.
maybe even books if you're lucky, but how do you operate? And so I'm wondering, like, how, like, it sounds like for you that's where credit cards came in, and working hard and hustling in
That's
terms
right.
of multiple jobs. But like that pressure to be a student, which means you need to still keep your grades up, and you're trying to at least function, and then maybe you might have the pressure to like do a little bit more, and that all comes down to like financial decisions.
Yes. Yes, it does. And honestly, I would say a little bit of it is like also who my friends were at the time.
Yeah.
Because at that age, you're so impressionable when you're still in your teens and early 20s. And I was very lucky to just immediately connect into a group of people. I mean, they were just my tribe. My girls were
Nice.
very academically driven. I mean, obviously they were at Brown just like
Yeah.
me, but there were plenty of slackers around me. These girls were not like they were just we pushed each other to make sure our applications were in on time when we were applying for different things. They would put me on to opportunities for work on campus. We were just always studying together, doing our papers together. And we would, check each other like, you can't go to this party because you didn't get your paper done. We would help each other just
That's
kind
good.
of stay level-headed,
Yeah.
because you could get overwhelmed with the social scene in terms of college life. But one of the things that for me, I definitely resonate with what you said about the scholarship thing, because I remember the moment that it kind of hit me like, I think I need some help. Like, I'm not able to manage with this money stuff. Like, yes, they pay my tuition, they pay for 3 meals a day with my meal plan, and they pay for my dorm room, so my room and board is covered. But what about all the things on a day-to-day life? Like, how am I going to, decorate my dorm room? How am I going to buy clothes for the winter? Like, in Rhode Island, winter is rough. There is snow everywhere. There's rain all the time. I mean, I didn't have winter boots. I didn't have an umbrella. Like, I was like, what? So just for me, I remember I had that moment where I was like, I think I'm going to need to ask for help. But then I kind of pulled back in and was like, wait, how am I going to fix my face to go ask somebody for help when they have given me 4 years of tuition, room and board, and meal plan for free? And I'm going to go knock on the door and ask for more?
Yeah.
How dare I? Like, I felt like I can't go ask them when they've already given. This institution has found the money to give me for 4 years, for me to dare to go and go to the dean's office and say I can't pay for stuff. And they're like, we've given you so much. It felt like I was begging. It felt like I was doing too much. And I think that that's something that I really wish I could go back and change. I wish I could change my mindset around that, because the truth is there are so many students from low income families, and especially children of immigrants, who are first generation. So they don't know, they don't have the parents to tell them, oh, this is what it's like in college, because their parents never went. So for me, that's what happened. And because of that, I let that shame and that embarrassment like hold me back from getting assistance. Because I'm sure that if I would have went to the dean and said I was struggling, they would have found opportunities. They would have put, grants in front of me, or opportunities to apply for additional scholarship funding. But I didn't even bother to tell someone I needed help. So help wasn't going to come my way.
Yeah, that shame and embarrassment is so powerful, and I know like I would feel that. I remember like once again being on scholarship, and there was some semesters where I was under the mark of the GPA, and I was terrified. Right, the thought of like same thing. Here I'm given this opportunity. Right, I know like my parents can't pay it on their if they had to pay it on their own. I couldn't, and like. Am I doing enough? And then the shame and embarrassment of what does it mean to ask for help or support, whether it be financially or academically, in all these ways. And I think there's so many ways that we expect people to work through shame, embarrassment, guilt at any age, but especially at a young age. And it's so difficult to know, wow, I'm just overwhelmed, or I need help and I need support, and I don't even know who to ask, how to ask, if I should ask, and where to do it, especially when you're a first gen, when you're trying to navigate all of that mostly on your own.
That's
It's a
right.
lot.
That's right. And not only is it a lot, but like psychologically, like some people are just not able to clear the negativity out of their mind so they can make room to think about a positive path forward. So I do think a lot of people actually need coaching, need therapy, need mentorship, so that they can actually make that leap mentally, like get out of that negative block out of their head and really actually start thinking about solutions. Because for me, that shame and embarrassment put a chokehold on my brain, and I wasn't able to ever step out of that and go talk to somebody about the help I needed. And that's why I graduated college with $20,000 of credit card debt. And that is like, for me, it was embarrassing. It was hard. I mean, in a lot of ways, I look back at it and I go, that mistake was actually a blessing in disguise, because if I would have never done that, I don't think I would have ever taken money so seriously as I do today, to the point where now, I mean, I'm a financial educator professionally. I mean, I work at a nonprofit full time that does financial education. And I also have my MissBeHelpful LLC business where I do financial education. So I don't think I would be the person that I am today if I hadn't made those mistakes and overcame them and figured out that there was so much that's broken in our systems of education and government and policy, and that we need to really fight for change so that the next generation doesn't repeat the mistakes that millennials, Gen X, and all the generations before them have made.
And shout out to the experiences and the things that we have to go through that then shape us, right? And that's what I hear when you say that, right? Those things that we go through that really sometimes shift and dynamically impact us for our future. And when you're saying one, I want to clarify something too. Like, I think that what you and I are talking about, like, on some level, the struggles and challenges that we went through even in college, we were still fortunate, lucky, blessed to be in college, be in great
So,
institutions, and get an education. And we know that there's a lots of people, they're not even in college and they're struggling with credit cards, or they're struggling with debt, or they're struggling with money management, or they're still first gen in terms of going to a technical school,
Yes.
or getting a decent job where they can like earn some income, or the pressure within the family is put on them and they're still just 17 to 20 something.
That's
So
right.
I want to like give them some props because I know that there's a lot of people who don't get into the place.
That's right.
But I also want to just highlight $20,000 coming out of college, owing $20,000 when your family doesn't have 20,000 is a big number, period. But then when your family doesn't have money and you don't have money, like when did the weight of 20,000 hit you?
I was actually avoiding the whole thing for so long that I didn't know the total amount of debt that I had. I just knew that there was amounts that I owed on multiple different credit cards, and there was a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there, a couple thousand over there, and I was just kind of keeping them all separate. I would just pay the minimum balance on all my credit cards every month so that at least, I knew that I was meeting the due date. Like for me, due dates is a big thing. In school, when you're a nerd, like you do not miss that due date. So
Yeah.
at least from academic experience, that carried over from school to my credit card and for money life, because I would see the statements come in with the due date, the payment date, and I would be like, all right, I'm not playing. I'm going to send that $45 by that day. So the due dates I always maintained. And to me, that was a blessing because that actually helped me have an excellent credit score later when I actually brought the debt down. And I had no idea that when you make on-time payments every single month, you're really boosting your credit. I didn't know anything about credit. So a lot of times people say, oh, I'm gonna stay away from credit cards because it leads to $20,000 of debt. It leads to negative things. But actually, being the fact that I opened my credit card at 18 years old was one of the number one reasons why I have excellent credit today, above 820. And that is very difficult to achieve. I'm not even 35 yet.
Nope. Nope.
So for me, I do see that it worked out in my favor, and I did some things that helped me. But the one thing I did that did not help me was I kept everything separate and I never looked at the total. So one day, I remember I was going through just like everything that I had to pay, and I sent some money to my parents. I paid off some of my credit card bills, my cell phone bill, and I looked at my checking account and it was like no money left. And I just remember sitting there like, how is this possible? Every month I send money to all the credit cards, and then yet they still don't decrease in the amount that I owe. Like, it don't make sense. I don't know complicated interest rate math on credit cards, but I do know basic subtraction. And if I send
Yes.
you a payment and you subtract it, it should be less. So I just kind of, that moment just like got me mad. And so I called up the credit card company. I was like, I already made a payment and I don't see any effect on the total amount due. It's actually even a little higher. Like, this doesn't make sense. And she sat me, I sat down and she explained to me like, well, sweetie, this credit card has a really high interest rate. And if you understand how that works, you're leaving a remaining balance every month that you're not paying off. So the more you keep doing that, the more that, 22% interest is just going to you're going to keep getting those fees, and they're going to go right back up. Even though you sent a payment, the interest charges are undoing the work you're doing by trying to submit these little payments here or there. And so when I sat down and like looked that up, I realized interest was killing me across the board, because I had like 19% on one card, 22% on another card. One card, I think I had a late payment, and then they bumped me up to a penalty rate of 27%, which is so high. I mean, when people talk about student loans and like how bad the interest is on those, I agree it's bad, but student loans are capped at like 6-7%.
Mm-hmm.
Credit cards can go up to 29.99% legally without breaking the law, right? That is so high. So for me, I sat down and I said, all right, it's a wrap. I need to get this under control. So I pulled open a spreadsheet and I put all the amounts in and I added it up, and I saw that it was like just a little bit over 20,000. And one of the loans that I had in there was actually a student loan. It was like probably $5,000 or $6,000 that I owed for a study abroad program, and all the rest was just credit cards. And a lot of that was really the interest that had been accruing. It wasn't really the purchases that I made. Some of it was, but like it was a lot of interest. So that's when it hit me. And at that time, I had just gotten a job, my first job out of college. I was a classroom teacher. I joined Teach for America. So I was out in Canarsie, Brooklyn, teaching elementary school, third and
Not
fourth
making a
grade.
lot of money.
And I saw my salary. My salary when I got my offer was $39,500. It wasn't even 40 yet. So I was like, let me just round up and be generous. Let me say I'm making $40,000 a year, and I owe 20,000.
Mm-hmm.
How does that like make any sense? That half of everything that I make pre-tax it is owed to these credit cards. So unless I instantly like send this 20,000, I'm going to end up owing more because of the interest. So I was really in a tight position, and I realized the math just wasn't making sense. And that's when I just started hustling. Like I started tutoring on Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays, babysitting on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays, making videos for any company that would pay me to make a video, selling stuff on Etsy. I was just anything that I could do to make $1 to send that extra money to the credit cards so that I could get out of the debt as fast as possible. And that was, that took me about 18 months of making payments of over $1,000 a month. Just like it was probably about $1,200 every month for 18 months until I finally paid it all off.
One, that's just awesome that you were able to pay it off, that you were able to recognize what it was, then you were able to pay it off by using all your skills and talents and finding a way how to make that extra money, to make those payments, to get there. And I'm curious though, what is it that was in you that allowed you to use those skills and talents to make that extra money? Because some people will look at that and say like, okay, I'll put in an extra $50, or I'll eat peanut butter and jelly or whatever. But you seem like you had a whole plan, a whole mission. What is it about you that allowed that to happen?
I can't even take credit for it. I did have a plan, but it wasn't my plan. I remember one day after I did like the spreadsheet where I added up all the money, and I was just like in tears. I was so stressed out. I was at the store. I remember if it was CVS or Walgreens or Dwayne Reed, but I was in the pharmacy in New York, and I was always in the habit of stopping by the pharmacy to buy stuff that I did not need. I would buy like candles and lotion, a little Snickers bar here or there. And it was just like that day I was sitting there, or we're standing in line about to pay, and I looked over, and usually it's like a magazine rack with like, celebrity drama and stuff. But for some reason at this pharmacy, they had books, like they had like actual, reading books. And one of them was Women and Money by Susie Orman.
Wow.
I never heard of this woman. I remember her face looked familiar because she had a big radio show and a TV show, but I didn't pay attention to it. So, but I picked up the book because I was like, I'm a woman, and I was literally up here crying yesterday about money. So let me just get this book and see.
This title speaks to me.
Exactly. I was like, it's almost like the clouds parted and God was just like, women and money. Here's this book that you need to read. Yes. And so, I picked up the book. I think it cost me like $9, and it was the best purchase that I ever made, because that book, it was everything that I had been struggling and stressing, with, but in more, not negative. It was in an empowering way, the way that she put it in that book. So she was like, doesn't matter how much debt you have, you can put a debt repayment plan together and know the day that you will become debt free, even if it's 12 years from now, even if it's 7 years from now, even if it's, doesn't matter how long in the future, you'll know that day. And that can be freeing for you to know that it's not a forever thing. And so she just empowered me in that book. I put into practice the plan that she has, a 9-month plan. I did that 2 times through, and that's why it took me about 18 months. But after I read her book, I was just like, and this goes back to what I was saying when you opened the podcast, when you asked me about like my upbringing. Normally I would go to the internet, but because I'm that kind of kid that was more like reading, I like to learn through reading. That book made me want to know what other books are out there that I wanted. So I started reading every book about personal finance and money and development that you could think of. I read Your Money and Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. I read The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. I just couldn't stop. I just kept on reading all these books, and book after book after book. The number one thread in it was, you have to spend less than you make and invest the difference. And that sounds so basic and so simple, but honestly, the majority of Americans don't do that, either because they're not able to financially, or because they don't know what the heck that means or how to do it. So those books really, transformed my life. And that was how I actually put my debt repayment plan in place. And then once I paid off the debt, I just began pretending that like the money that I used to pay to the credit cards, I still owed it to someone, but the person I owed it to was myself. Good. So I just started to send that same $1,200 every month to investments. And I've been investing ever since I paid off my debt. And that has been honestly the best move I could have made for myself, because I can actually see myself building wealth. And it's a slow process, but it's slow and steady, but I'm actually seeing it, you know, slowly but surely. My amount of my net worth, like my total amount of money that I have across all my accounts, has just been increasing in a way that it would never have happened if I had just kept putting my money in my savings account at the bank.
That's awesome, and I think part of this is it does talk about your drive and your work ethic and your willingness to learn, which I think is some of the things that sometimes we can struggle with, right? We can know what the problem is, and maybe we don't want to put the work to it, or maybe it just feels overwhelming and it crushes us,
Right.
or maybe we don't want to learn more about how to, or even what we talked about before, sometimes we don't want to ask for help because the shame and embarrassment, or to be seen, like to be in the checkout and have a book about women and money is like,
Right.
you could think about like, oh, people are going to judge me, they're going to think I
Right.
got money problems. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things that can happen, but there's a way that you push through it. And on my end, I know like there was times where some of those same books early in college and a little bit after I read, and I was like, yes, I'm going to pay off stuff. And I paid it off. And then I went right back in it. Right. So, like,
Mm.
there's a way that you were able to say never again.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering, how did you develop, I'm not going back in that trap again. I'm not gonna, because I know the times where I paid off my credit cards, I felt great, and then I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna do it. And then somewhere down the line, I say like, all right, maybe I'll put this on it, and then it snowballs really quickly.
That's
So I'm
right.
wondering what allowed you to say never again, to get caught up in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just this like overwhelming this sense of responsibility that I had to my parents particularly, but my family, like how you said your parents talked to you about credit cards and told you like don't do it, you get into debt. My parents never had a debit card or a credit card in their lives until very recently, actually, because my parents retired. My dad retired a couple years ago, and my mom was able to get. My dad has his Social Security benefits now, and my mom was able to get spousal a supplemental Social Security because of the fact that my dad's entitled to. So even though she doesn't have the 40 credits, I was able to do her application to get half of what my dad collects. In order to do that, they both needed to have checking accounts where the government can direct deposit their Social Security benefits. And I mean, first of all, kudos to the Social Security Administration for being, encouraging for retirees to actually have bank accounts, because my parents didn't have. And so that was the first time I actually opened their online bank accounts. They each now have a debit card. They collect their Social Security benefits. But before that, cash only.
Wow.
Cash only for my entire adult life, even up until very recently, I have only seen them with cash only. So that for me was like, I felt like my parents and even me to some extent of a certain portion of my life, we have been deprived of the opportunity to build wealth because we were never taught, because we were never provided access to opportunities. We were never explicitly told that there are tools out there like investment accounts and, financial people that you can talk to help with this. And because all of that was withheld from us, I felt like now I have to not necessarily get revenge, but like I felt like I'm going to get it anyway.
Okay.
Y'all didn't want us to learn about it. Well, watch now. Like, I'm not going to owe you any interest, any debt.
Yes.
I'm going to make that money grow in the market. I'm going to invest. I'm going to save and invest. And I'm also going to help my parents understand. And then now I can pass that down to the future generations of my family. And never again will you have somebody who makes the mistakes that I made because they didn't know. If they do it, it's because they chose to anyway, but they knew better. Me, I didn't know better. So I want to be the last person in my family who can say honestly that they didn't know any better. And that, that was what motivated me. I was like, listen, I could keep acting crazy with these credit cards and continue repeating the cycle of poverty that my parents experienced and the grandparents experienced and great-grandparents, or I could be the one to break that cycle of poverty and be like, nope, it ends with me. And so that might not sound like crazy to a lot of people, might not sound so, like such a big deal, but I'm gonna tell you, it was such a big deal for me. That idea that I was gonna be the one to break the cycle, I wore it like a badge of honor, and I took it on as a really strong sense of responsibility that I had to stop playing games and actually get my money right.
I love it. I love it. And, once again, I think that not everyone holds that badge, right? Like in that way, right? Not everyone recognizes that some unique time thing happened where you are that individual that can really shift or create a light in the family that makes things different. For me, that was the thought of like being a therapist, the thoughts of what I think about with family, what I think about relationships, that wanting that to be something that was different throughout all of our families.
That's right.
And when I hear you and all that you're doing, I love it, and I'm encouraged and excited about it. And I want you to share more about the actual work now that you've been doing.
Yeah.
But I would love for you to start with, what does it mean for you to be a Latina, Latinx woman, who's been out there, and and particularly, what does it mean to be talking about these things for Black and Brown communities? I know that you care about everybody, but I know it's different for you to be talking about this than a Susie Orman, right, or some of these other folks.
That's right.
It's different for you to represent so many people, or to think about so many folks who sometimes proportionately fall in that category of struggling with money for lots of reasons, lots of layers. So I'm curious about that, and if you could also talk about the work that you've been doing.
Absolutely. So I mean, for me, it's hugely important because when I started, I didn't see anybody that looked like me, talked like me, had a similar background to me, understood, the struggles that I was uniquely experiencing being a Latina daughter of immigrants. And I feel like once I started talking about money, I realized there were so many others like me who also didn't really see their experiences reflected or represented in personal finance. Because let's be real, personal finance is very, very male dominated, and particularly white males dominate the space. So that is definitely something that I take pride in, because I feel like, first of all, it took me overcoming my fear of being open and just talking and being transparent, because there's a lot of things that I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about. Like, it could be embarrassing for me to sometimes to talk about how poor we're growing up, and my parents are still, technically poor. And so for me to talk about that is tough. I have to get over the shame. I have to get over the taboo. I have to navigate through it differently in my mind. And so I take pride in it, because I realized that I could let it hold me back from talking openly. But instead, all of my experiences that I've had, that yes, a lot of people might judge or might, laugh at it. But like, listen, I see it. I wear it as a badge of honor. I do. I'm like, listen, the fact that I started the race 15 miles behind everyone else, and I still ended up at or beyond them.
Yep.
I should never be ashamed of that. That's something to take pride in.
Watch me work.
Let us never be ashamed of how tough it was for us to get where we are, because that's truly what's going to inspire and motivate the people that are coming up like us, who might feel like they have no chance. You do have a chance. And by seeing others who have a similar struggle, that can help you. One quick example, and then I'll talk about my work, is a lot of times, for example, Susie Orman and others like her, they'll talk about budgeting, right? And they're like, this is how you got to budget. You have to make sure that you pay yourself first, and you pay. That idea by itself, paying yourself first, is culturally problematic for Latinx and Black cultures, especially, and other Black, Indigenous, people of color populations, because when you are in a community of color, oftentimes your culture is a collective culture. Yes. We are not individualistic culture, which is the total opposite of collectivist. Collectivist versus individualistic. I am never, ever, ever going to be comfortable doing things for myself as an individual first, before my family, before my community, because my culture taught me that it's about the collective. Yeah. So when I get money, the first thing I'm doing is checking in with my family. Are you guys good? What do we need? Are we okay? And if so, then I can save a little for myself. Yes. So when you tell people pay yourself first, you're not respecting the cultural sensitivity that they have to experience when they hear that message. It's a little disrespectful in some ways to not even acknowledge that there may be some cultural differences and challenges that don't allow people to do money the same way that you do money. And so for me, that was huge. And also the fact that like there are things that you will never understand having to budget for. Like my parents always find somehow, even though they never had a lot of money, they always found a way to send $100 to Dominican Republic, to our cousins and uncles and aunts who are struggling even more than we were. And so that idea of, I recently learned there's a term for that, which is remittances. I never heard that word before, but remittances is the word that is when you send money to your home country, another country that's outside of the US.
I didn't know that word either, because that was also part of our family.
I'm sure Jamaicans send remittances back home to Jamaica, and all the Caribbean, listen, Indian, Asian, all of us, all these communities of color in America that have immigrant, roots and that have a native country that's outside of America, we tend to send money back. And that is a huge part of our family budget that is not mentioned in any of the personal finance book that I read. So I just felt like, yes, there was this gap of a lack of cultural connectedness. And so by me being the person to speak about it, I feel like there are people who have, like, I've seen messages in my DMs, I've gotten comments on my YouTube, I get emails from people saying, thank you so much, because I have never heard anyone talk about the struggle of dealing with remittances while also trying to deal with your family, trying to deal with planning your retirement, but also having to help your parents because you're their retirement plan. Yes. Those things are not mentioned in these books. And so to your question about like, how does it feel, being a Latina in the space, it's difficult because I have to constantly be like, politely pushing back on things that people say that I'm like, well, you have to understand that that's your lived experience and your culture. But at the same time, I take pride because I know that I'm giving hope and inspiration to so many others who grew up in Black and Latino neighborhoods like mine and did not necessarily see anything that resonated with them in other messages in the personal finance space.
Yeah, I just want to say, shout out to you and all that you've been doing. When I was invited to be a part of the Financial Literacy Council for CNBC and saw that you were there, I was super excited. And one, to just see, more faces of color, yes, to see the awesome, amazing, dope work that you've been doing, and to see how you show up and represent for everybody, but also for people who are people of color, people who have struggles, people who are first gen, the way that you uniquely find a way to say, I see you, and that financial independence, financial freedom is not just for one set of people. It's not even just for the folks who've been to college. It's not just for, right? There's so many others. And I think there's a way that you've approached it that makes people feel like, oh, it can be for me too? Yeah, yes, it can. So share more about the work that you do and have been doing.
Yeah, definitely. So I was asked to be on the Financial Wellness Council for CNBC because of my work at Next Gen Personal Finance, which is my full-time 9 to 5. It's a nonprofit organization that offers free curriculum within personal finance for teachers at middle school and high school. So if you are looking to teach students in the classroom about budgeting, banking, investing, paying for college, the difference between saving account versus a checking account, credit, managing credit, debt repayment, insurance, taxes, everything under money, we have everything that you need. Lesson plans, activities, games, homework assignments, tests and answer keys, videos, games, everything. And it's all free on this website, which is ngpf.org. Nice. If you know a teacher, if you yourself are a teacher, like this is like the best gift you could give them, because it's going to save them so much time on planning and lesson planning and creating, because everything's already there, ready made. And so I didn't find out about them until they reached out to me, because I started in personal finance. Actually, after I paid off that debt, I created my YouTube channel, MissBeHelpful, and I just started making videos about like quick tutorials, right? Like what I learned about credit and how I paid off my credit card debt and the books that I was reading and examples that I was using that inspired me to invest and save and be more cognizant of my spending and just change my mindset about money. And so once those videos were like doing a little better than, I expected, honestly, because I thought a couple hundred views here or there would be cool, but 10,000, 20,000, 30, 40, 50,000 subscribers. I was like, what in the world? Like something's going on here. People like this, they need it. They recognize the value of it. And so NGPF was one of the folks that reached out to me and said, we really love the videos that you have, and the fact that your unique experience combines the fact that you used to be a teacher and now you're teaching personal finance. It kind of fits perfectly with the mission of this
You're everything
nonprofit.
we've ever wanted.
And I was like, you know what? I don't know if I want to go work at a nonprofit. Like I had just left my job at another nonprofit that focused on literacy intervention, so reading skills for students that are way behind. Because I'm gonna tell you the truth. Part of this financial literacy issue is a literacy issue.
Yes.
It's the fact that when you pick up a book and you try to read about money, half of the words on the low end, half the words are foreign to you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like me trying to read a book in a language that I don't speak. How am I going to understand this if half the words, I literally have never heard of these words before? Interest, compounding, amortize, mortgage. I mean, these words are literally another language for so many people.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things before coming to personal finance I had always been passionate about, because I was teaching and I recognized that so many of my students were like in 3rd and 4th grade, but they could only read like kindergarten and 1st grade books. And that gap, like, it scared me, because I was like, you know what? If they keep moving ahead in school, being this far behind, how are they going to be able to read contracts? How are they going to be able to sign? They're not going to read it. They're just going to sign it. And that's a huge problem. So I recognize that even if I'm the best teacher ever, and I do catch them up and they're on grade level or above grade level, and I've done my job, like a bang up job in education, I was above grade level every year. I got a scholarship to Brown. I still made every money mistake in the book. So something wasn't right. I realized that within the education system, you could be the best student with a 4.0 GPA and still make every mistake with credit cards and loans, and because they're not teaching about money in schools. So when this nonprofit reached out to me, when NGPF reached out, I was like, this is actually the opportunity for me to figure out where I can plug myself in and fix that problem. The fact that when I was teaching, I never taught kids about money. And when I was a student, I was never taught about money. How can we create change now? How can we make sure that moving forward, we are learning about money in schools? We are teaching students about how credit works and how paying for college works and what bank accounts make sense, and the difference between a bank and a credit union, and everything, right? How to file your taxes, these basic things. So, long story short, the work that I do now is in part serving teachers, right? Giving them training, getting them the materials that they need, the curriculum and everything around money. But the other aspect of it is with an affiliated organization called Mission 2030 Fund. And that is a real game changer, because at that organization, my work is working with lawmakers and leaders in different state houses and even lobbyists to have meetings where we create bills that then are able to be proposed as law that will require students to get access to a personal finance class in high school before they graduate. So far in the past, I would say like 8 to 9 months, we've gone from 7 states that require a personal finance class before you graduate high school to 15 states. Nice. And just most recently, the state of Michigan, the state of Florida, and the state of North Carolina, the state of Ohio, the state of Rhode Island, just, pass laws and had governors sign bills that will require this. So that means that I went from recognizing that there was a problem in the system to actually putting in place laws that can change. That is like amazing.
That's so awesome. And when as you're talking about it, right, like this, I've often said, like, in graduate school, learning to be a therapist, I learned everything of how to be in the room and to support somebody, but nothing about business. Boom. And nothing about running a practice, nothing necessarily about even some of those things. So what you're saying is that if you don't learn these words, if you don't have a financial literacy class in high school, you may not have it in college, you may not have it in grad school. You could literally go through an educational path, a professional path, and still never learn how to navigate personal finance as well as business finance. That's just crazy. And so to be able to set up laws and help people to say, you will at least learn something, and then you can figure out what you want to do with it from there, I think that's just great.
And to your point about how if you graduate high school and you don't get a class of money, you're not going to get it anywhere else. What about all the kids that aren't like us, that they didn't end up going to college, right? This is why I'm so passionate about getting these laws passed, because you have to get the class before you turn 18, because everyone doesn't turn 18 and go to college. Exactly. So we have to think about equity, really making sure we're serving everyone. In order for this to truly be equitable, we have to think about the kids that don't go to college, because a lot of people out there will say, well, you know, personal finance and business, those are classes they should really be taking in college. No, two of my younger brothers chose not to go the college pathway.
Yeah.
They don't deserve to learn what to do with their paycheck.
Yeah.
Of course they do. So to me, I think that's why there's so much passion around the work I do and making sure that it's taught in high school before you cross the graduation stage. Because the reality is, no matter where you go after that, you need to know how to manage that paycheck.
That's awesome. Look, you've been doing just amazing work, and I think that it's great that you're actually able to see that it is not only changing lives but changing laws, which is so amazing. And I know that you've been able to do great work in lots of different places. And so some of the last few questions I like to ask folks is, with all that you're doing, is there anything, one, that you're doing currently, right, new, that's like, you know, fresh right now? And is there anyone that you would love to work with when you think about, like, to collab with or connect with or to do something with? Who would that be?
Okay, so I have two things that I'm thinking of. But okay, so for the first question, yes, I mean, I feel like for me, the biggest thing about social media is that it's such a great tool to reach out to, you know, to find other people and to just connect with them. So I did a poll on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and I asked people, what is the number one thing that in your 20s and 30s that you're most stressed about when it comes to money? And everybody said retirement. They just don't understand the 401k they get at their job, or they don't know the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. So a cool new project that I'm working on outside of my work at NGPF, I actually developed an Ira Boot Camp, which is a 90-minute workshop. And it is all about understanding how to take retirement into your own hands and make sure that you can retire with at least $1 million or more. Because I think a lot of people think $1 million is like not achievable for certain people. And I want to show you that it is, and you don't need to be rich to get rich. And so I actually just taught an Ira Boot Camp August 28th. And it was awesome. I mean, just like, and I love to keep the cohort small because that way everybody can unmute and ask questions. And when I tell you, people left that workshop being like, I had never had a class like this where you just put it so plain and simple. You gave so many examples. I felt like I could just unmute and ask you anything. And I think that's what we need more of. So I'm going to just keep working on new cohort-based learning courses like that, where anybody can come in and just feel like, you know, what if we were just sitting around at the lounge in college talking about a specific class that we're all taking, right? Like, that's what I want this to feel like. And so Ira Boot Camp, if anybody follows me on Instagram at MissBeHelpful, just keep an eye on those boot camps. If you know yourself that you need to get your retirement situation right, I go into a lot of detail. Yeah, sign up. So I had one in August. There'll be another one in October and another one in the spring, because the last day to actually fund an IRA for a given year is April 15th, the tax deadline of the following year. So in April 2023, that's when you got to make sure you put in your last contributions for your 2022 IRA, and that there's some urgency, like in February, March, and April, around getting people to recognize that they can, you know, put in some money for the previous year and get a little tax break if they do the traditional IRA route. So yeah, so that's the new project I'm working on. I love the fact that I can leverage social media to reach younger people.
That's awesome.
And then in terms of who I would want to work with, I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't understand, especially young people, is how big of a deal taxes are. The number one most expensive thing that people think they have to pay for in their life is either college or a house. And both of those are wrong. The most expensive thing you pay for in your life is your taxes. All throughout the course of your life, every time you make $1, you have to pay taxes on that dollar. So if people understood why like a tax strategy that is really well thought through is so critical in maximizing the amount of wealth that you're able to maintain for yourself and your family. And that's part of the IRA boot camp. Is kind of like understanding pre-tax accounts versus after-tax accounts. Yeah. So one person that I recently been following, I love him, is Duke Loves Taxes. I don't know if y'all follow him or if you follow him, Dr. George, but like, he's hilarious. And he's on TikTok primarily, but I look at his content on Instagram a lot. And he just breaks down taxes in a hilarious way. He's a young Black guy. He is great, like hilarious comedian / creator, but he will break down tax strategies and tax tips and tax information in like just such a funny way. And he's got like hundreds of thousands of followers, but in my mind, I imagine like teaming up with him to do something that helps young people understand why investing and taxes together, like, is like, I always say it's like coffee and milk, café con leche. Like, they taxes and investing, if you think you're investing and you're building wealth and you haven't thought about the tax implications, then you're not doing it right. You constantly have to be thinking about taxes. Like, these young boys love to go on Robinhood and buy stocks. And it's like, if you sell it in less than a year, you know that you're going to have to pay at least 10% taxes on that. But if you hold it for more than a year, you can pay 0%. So these are the types of things that we have to understand. So for me, I would give a shout out to Duke Loves Taxes. He's hilarious. And that would be a cool collab.
Look, I love, once again, everything that you're saying, and that collab. One, the IRA Boot Camp, shout out to that, and encouragement for everyone to sign up and really give yourself this talk I've been given, it's called I Give Myself Permission, right? And it's really just encouraging people that sometimes we find reasons to say no.
Yes.
Right? I don't have the time, or shame and embarrassment, or we don't do that, whatever it is. These are all things to say no, when it's like, no, here it is, sign up, go for it, like, learn. And I love the collab with you and Duke Love Taxes. I'm gonna check them out and see the work. Last two questions I like to ask is, what does mental wellness mean for you?
Ooh, for me, mental wellness means making the time to check in with myself and delete and ignore and erase everything else outside of my own head. All the noise, all the opinions, all the media, all the buzz, everything, people's opinions of me. I want to actually always and constantly promise myself that I will build in time for me to sit with myself, because that's what allows me to have mental health and wellness within my mindset. Is there's a quiet and a peace that gives me the opportunity to see, how do I feel about that? Yeah. How does this make me feel? Am I good with this? A lot of people just go mode, and they never take the time to be still and check in with themselves. Does that make me happy? Is that what I actually want? Or am I doing this to make mom happy? Or am I doing this to make my boyfriend happy? Am I doing this because my best friend is pressuring me to go? Like, I feel that making time for myself to sit quietly, and sometimes that means writing my thoughts down, is what, like, a strong place it has been for me in terms of my mental health.
I love that. And in so many ways, like you said, people go, and they're not aware of all the influences, the billboard, the commercial, your mom, the neighborhood, culture, the whatever, right? That all these things could be, I don't mean it in this way, but the different voices that we have in our own minds, and to really slow it down, to be still, to say, can I hear my voice? And so I think that's just awesome. Yeah. The last question is, what mental wellness advice would you give to your younger self? And that could be as younger as yesterday or anytime before that.
Okay, so I've been writing a lot more now. And recently, actually, about a month ago, I started a gratitude journal, which is something I have been meaning to try for so long. And every excuse in the book, I got time to write, I don't have time for this. So I forced myself to start, and I do it, 3 to 4 times a week minimum. I try to do it every day, but I'm just writing down, what am I feeling gratitude for? What am I feeling grateful for? What is making me feel joy? What is making me feel happy this week, today, this morning? And I wish I could go back and make my younger self start writing more. And it doesn't just have to be gratitude. Like, the gratitude journal is working for me right now because I'm at a place in my life where I'm feeling abundance of gratitude in my 30s, right? That's just where I'm at. But when I was in my early 20s and my teens, I actually felt a lot of stress, a lot of confusion, misdirection. I had a lot of questions. And I wish I had been writing those things down for 2 reasons. One is a selfish reason for me as a 33-year-old now. I kind of wish I could go back and know what was I doing when I was 18? What was in my head? I don't remember, because the time goes on and you add more to your brain, and your brain starts to forget the other stuff. So I wish I could go back and see what I was going through in my mind and my life when I was 20, when I was 19, when I was 22, because it would help me better relate to the 19, 22-year-olds right now. And also it would help me understand, really and truly how far I've come from that place to now. But also more, less selfishly for me today, and more so for benefiting my 18-year-old self, is that is a therapy in and of itself. Maybe I didn't have the courage to go speak to someone like a therapist or like a doctor or a person, a coach or mentor. But writing everything down is in and of itself a therapy. That has been very therapeutic for me. And being able to go back and read what I was struggling through, questions that I was asking, that I was looking for answers for, and being able to say, wow, like I actually know the answers to some of those questions now. It can help you feel grateful, feel reassured, and know that what you're doing is in the right direction for yourself in your life. So I would say to any young person listening now, not just to my former younger self, is like, write more. Write every time you're confused, you're afraid, if you're crying, if you're stressed, pull out the book, write it down. Why are you crying? What's stressing you out? What questions do you feel like you can't answer right now that you really wish you could? Write it all down, because it's such a valuable exercise.
I love that. I love the thought of journaling, writing things down, and the gratitude journal can be so powerful.
Yes.
And sometimes it could be we don't recognize we have a lot to be grateful for, or that we do recognize we have a lot to be grateful for. And either way, it's still so powerful. I'm so glad that you're doing that and that you were willing to kind of share that with everyone. And I'm so glad that you were willing to join me today and just share your journey, your experiences. I've learned so much. There's so many ways that we are aligned, and your passion, your hard work, the way that you're like, look, I'm here on a mission. I'm here to like to have my life look a certain way, but that as I change and improve, I'm going to help other people change and improve.
That's
You know,
right.
someone once shared the phrase that all boats rise with the tide, right? Like, like the thought of like, as I grow, everybody else around me is going to grow. And you've been
Yes.
committed to that. And just, that's just awesome. And I really appreciate what you've been doing. And, what's also cool is that I recognize that there's some other pockets. I don't know how much you've worked on this or talked about this, but that whole shame and embarrassment piece really feels like that lines up so much in the work that I do now. And maybe that's something we think about, how to help people work through shame and embarrassment around money, around where they just might be or where they might not have, because I think that can be a struggle for people. So with all that, I just look forward to growing with you and building with you and just supporting. Everybody go check out the IRA Boot Camp,
Yes.
MissBeHelpful on Instagram as well as YouTube. And before we go, is there anything last that you want to say?
No, just thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Folks who are out here listening, do not be hesitant to reach out to me, because I'm not one of those people that has a lot of followers and just like ignores everybody. I do really respond to people that DM me or that email me. So feel free to reach out if there's anything that I said today that resonated with you, or that you're looking for help for, encouragement or resources. Just reach out. I am definitely an open book.
Yanely, thanks so much for just being you and being awesome and
Thank
showing
you.
up. Happy birthday this week.
Yeah.
Enjoy. And I look forward to talking more. Thanks for joining me on
Thank
LEAPcast.
you.
Wow. What an incredible ride we just went on with another great member of the LEAPcast community. I appreciate you listening and hope you got some tangible value from the episode. Please let us know what you think by leaving a comment, rating, and review. As always, please don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This is Dr. George James, and I'll see you next time.